talk about cannabis and spirituality. It's going to be a bit of a different approach, but we're going to learn about a word called entheogen. Cannabis has often been used as an entheogen. Welcome back to the high class. I'm Josh, and today I'm wearing a kurta. This kurta was given to me by my friend Nitin so that I could properly celebrate in Holi, which is a traditional holiday, holy day in India, where Nitin is from. So I'm wearing this kurta because today's lesson is going to be about cannabis and spirituality. Let's go. Hi. You're asking yourself, how does cannabis relate to spirituality or religion? We know that hemp has been used as far back as 3000 BC. That's well over 5,000 years ago. So how does hemp and cannabis differentiate when we go back 5,000 years? Well, hemp was used for more industrial purposes, while cannabis was actually used by the priests and the healers. For thousands of years, cannabis and the secrets around it were guarded by the healers. The reason for this, if you think about any entheogen, the reason that there was someone in the tribe that knew all about it and protected its secrets and passed its secrets on to the next healer was because these plants cause very euphoric, enlightening experiences, and if a child were to get their hands on them or someone was to dose them incorrectly, it could cause harm. So the correct dosages and the usages and the proper preparations were passed down from healer to healer, from priest to priest, and these were guarded secrets. Hemp, on the other hand, not so much. When it comes to guarding the secrets of cannabis and its healing properties, or even its magical properties, the differentiation between the healers and the shamans or magicians or the witches is something that's going to come up later as we start to talk about how cannabis and spirituality became intertwined in a not so positive way. But we'll get to that closer to the end. For right now, priests and healers, witches and shamans, they guarded the secrets of these power plants or entheogens. An entheogen is any plant that is used to help have a mystical or enlightening or otherworldly experience. Cannabis is only one of the many entheogens that humanity has been using for thousands of years, and its secrets have been guarded by the priests and the healers. And the difference between the priest or the healer is going to be important later, but we'll talk about it later. For right now, let's talk about how the different religions around the world used cannabis. Traditionally, how cannabis has been used as an entheogen by different cultures around the world. Cannabis was used in Japan, traditionally in Shintoism, during marriage. It was used to bring the couples closer together and bless their marriage with happiness and laughter. In India, in Hinduism, it was said that the god Shiva brought cannabis down from the Himalayas to bring enjoyment and enlightenment to the people. In fact, the sadhu priests travel India with chillum pipes, sharing cannabis with whoever they encounter. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna actually says, "I am the healing herb," And cannabis is used in some very explicit adult ways if you are to look at its use in the Kama Sutra. Also in India, but in Tibet and China, in Buddhism, cannabis is used to help achieve a state of enlightenment. Siddhartha, who went on to become Buddha, is actually said to have eaten nothing but hemp seeds and oil for something like 6 years before going to sit under the Bodhi tree and gaining enlightenment. And many Buddhists consider cannabis to be one of their most holy plants. Interestingly, the Magi, which stems, or even the word magic, which stems from Magi, who were the priests of Zoroastrianism, which is a really old religion, cannabis was used by the Zoroastrians among their chief priest class as a primary herb and oil for healing and enlightenment. The Essenes in Israel also used hemp medicinally, and the Therapeutia, which is where we get the word therapeutic, the Therapeutia, or the healing priests of Egypt, used cannabis. So this is a really cool Jewish tradition. I'm not Jewish, so I have no idea if this is something that they still do. But purportedly, in the Temple of King Solomon, on their Holy Friday nights, 60 to 80,000 men would pass around incense bowls, up to 20,000 incense bowls filled with cannabis. And then they would go home for the biggest meal of the week. I mean, it sounds awesome, but I don't know if it's a tradition they still do. In Islam, the Sufis use cannabis for divine enlightenment. It's still practiced and used to achieve levels of divine enlightenment. Sufis say that it causes divine revelation and helps them achieve oneness with Allah. Some of the Coptic Christians in Ethiopia and Egypt use cannabis as well, and they believe that the sacred green herb in the field that's talked about in the Bible is cannabis. And where would we be without mentioning Rastafarianism, which is oneness, natural living, and the holy sacrament, which is cannabis, how they speak to God. Religions for thousands of years have been using cannabis as an entheogen, a way to communicate with God, a way to experience divine revelation, enlightenment, oneness with Allah. This plant has been used medicinally as well as spiritually for thousands and thousands of years. So how did we get where we are now, where everyone's terrified of this amazing, amazing plant? This is where we're going to start talking about the differentiation between the priests and the healers. So here's what happened. No, but really, in the 12th and 13th century, cannabis was made illegal by the church. And anyone who used hemp or cannabis to heal or communicate with God was labeled a witch and killed rather aggressively. This is where we bring in the differentiation between the healers and the priests. The priests were still allowed to have knowledge of how the plant worked, but anyone who was not a part of the church was labeled a witch for using the same plants. Kind of like the contradictory behavior of making wine a holy sacrament, but cannabis because of its ability to produce oil and paper, which they didn't want made because anyone other than the church writing was illegal, because it's easier to control people if they don't know anything. So what happened? In the 12th and 13th century, in France and Spain, the church made cannabis and hemp illegal. They didn't want anyone making paper or oil, and they didn't want anyone communicating with God. So anyone who was using cannabis to heal or communicate with the divine was labeled a witch and dealt with aggressively, right? So then the church at that point decides what medicines are okay, what medicines aren't. Here's another thing. Saint Joan of Arc was said to have used witches' blends to smoke. Among them were cannabis, and that's how she was hearing the voices that were telling her to do the things that she was doing. This is part of the reason that the church deemed cannabis as a satanic herb, which is interesting because the Gnostic Christians from the beginning of Christianity actually believed that it was one of the most holy herbs and used it for anointing and sacrament. But there's a lot of contradictions when it comes to power. The Spanish were telling the people that they were not allowed to use hemp, but while they were out colonizing, they were planting hemp everywhere for their ropes and their sails to help their garrisons and their fleets of ships. It's contradiction. But the only way to deal with contradictions and power battles that have nothing to do with you, me, or any of the people that are alive right now is through knowledge. And the knowledge, actually, some of the most important knowledge about cannabis came from a research group in Israel, the Mechulam Research Group. They helped in the 90s for us to discover that humans, amongst all other mammals, have an endocannabinoid system. We have receptors designed specifically for cannabinoids. We produce our own cannabinoid. This plant that we have used for thousands of years, both industrially and spiritually, has benefits. Cannabis has been used as a medicine for thousands of years, but it has also been used as an entheogen. And the spirituality and the spiritual practices around cannabis are part of the reason that it was deemed satanic by the church. Not to mention the fact that they didn't want anyone writing on paper, so the industrial side of hemp was tried to be wiped out as well. However, the Spaniards went around producing hemp everywhere because they needed it for their ropes and the sails on their ships. So hemp survived. Cannabis survived because there's all the rest of the world that was still practicing their spiritual practices and their medicinal practices with cannabis outside of the influence of that one religion, the church. Listening. That's pretty much it for today. That's how cannabis in some ways relates to spirituality. An important thing to know is that if cannabis works for you and it makes you feel good, there's nothing wrong with that. But if it doesn't work for someone else and it doesn't make them feel good, there's nothing wrong with that either. Let people be themselves and let you be yourself. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Like and subscribe and whatever I'm supposed to say after that part. See ya.